Elon Musk stepped into the headquarters of the United States Secret Service, but from the very moment the heavy steel doors shut behind him, he knew something was wrong. There were no security checks, no metal detectors, no identification required. No one even looked up to acknowledge his arrival. The entire process was unsettlingly smooth, as if they had been expecting him, as if they had already known he would come. The hallway stretched out in eerie silence, dimly lit by sterile fluorescent lights overhead. His footsteps echoed off the polished marble floor as he moved forward, guided by an agent in impeccably pressed black suit. The man did not speak, did not so much as glance at Musk, simply walking ahead with robotic precision. Finally, they reached a large, featureless metal door at the end of the corridor. Without a word, the agent swiped a keycard, and the door slid open with a whisper of compressed air. Inside, the room was nearly empty, except for a single, industrial-style steel table at the center. On top of it lay a thick, black folder. No clutter, no distractions. Just that one file, its presence commanding the entire space. Musk's eyes locked onto the bold, capitalized letters stamped across the cover. Elon Musk. Classified. A chill ran down his spine. He hesitated for a split second, then stepped forward and reached for the file. His fingers brushed against its surface, feeling the weight of whatever was inside. Slowly, he flipped it open. And what he saw inside made his breath hitch. This wasn't just some intelligence briefing, some governmental report detailing his public achievements or corporate dealings. No, this was something far more intrusive. It contained everything: his childhood in Pretoria, his earliest dreams of Mars, his thoughts on artificial intelligence, private conversations that had never been recorded, decisions he had made in absolute secrecy. Every moment of his life had been meticulously documented, and then his eyes fell to the last page. His stomach twisted. His pulse quickened. Elon Musk will disappear in 48 hours. The words weren't a warning. They weren't a threat. They were a statement, an absolute certainty. His grip on the paper tightened. He barely noticed the faint click of the door locking behind him, sealing him inside. Then, from the shadowed corner of the room, a deep, measured voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Musk, we need to talk." Everything began on what seemed like an ordinary morning. At SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, the first golden rays of sunlight filtered through the massive glass windows, casting elongated reflections across the high-tech control panels. Screens flickered, displaying live telemetry data from Starbase, the company's ambitious launch site. Elon Musk sat at his desk, fully immersed in reviewing the latest schematics for the Raptor engine, a key component in his dream of interplanetary travel. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his mind was already light years ahead, envisioning colonies on Mars, the expansion of artificial intelligence, and the next frontier of human civilization. Beside him, a cup of coffee sat untouched, its steam curling into the morning air. He had poured it out of habit, but hadn't taken a single sip. Then came the interruption. His assistant entered the room, her expression unreadable, and placed a black envelope on the desk in front of him. "This just arrived for you," she said. "No return address." Musk looked up, a flicker of curiosity passing across his face. A letter? In the digital age? Even more unusual, it was completely black. His hands reached for it instinctively. The surface of the envelope was strangely smooth, almost unnaturally sleek, like a material he couldn't quite place. No stamps, no government seals, no identifying markings whatsoever. He carefully slid a finger under the flap, opening it. Inside was a single sheet of flawlessly white paper, perfectly centered, holding just one line of text. "Your presence is required at the United States Secret Service headquarters, urgent." No instructions, no signature, no contact details, nothing. Just a single demand. Musk leaned back in his chair, narrowing his eyes slightly as he studied the paper. As one of the most influential figures on the planet, he was no stranger to government summons. He had sat across from world leaders, debated policies with the White House, consulted with NASA about the logistics of reaching Mars, and even been in meetings with the Pentagon regarding national security in space. But this was different. Every formal request he had ever received bore the weight of bureaucracy, official seals, classified markings, signatures of high-ranking officials. But this This was anonymous, yet somehow it felt more urgent than any request he had ever received. He tapped a finger against the desk, considering his options. Then, without hesitation, he made his decision. He was going. The journey to Washington, D.C. That same afternoon, Musk's private jet lifted off from Los Angeles, heading eastward toward Washington, D.C. As the aircraft climbed to cruising altitude, he sat by the window, deep in thought. The black envelope still rested in his jacket pocket. His mind, engineered to break down complex problems, analyzed the situation systematically. Was this an intimidation tactic from a government agency? A warning from someone within the system who couldn't speak openly? Or was it something beyond even the reach of those in power? Each possibility had holes. Governments were methodical. They followed protocol. This was too unstructured, too personal. And that made it all the more unsettling. The jet began its descent into Andrews Air Force Base. Musk frowned slightly. Why not Reagan or Dulles? If this was a simple government meeting, they would have sent him to a well-known public venue, the Capitol, the White House, or a secured Pentagon office. But this, a military airbase, it wasn't just unconventional, it was deliberate. Arrival in Washington, D.C. The moment the jet touched down, the final oddity revealed itself. There were no Secret Service agents waiting for him. No security detail, no armored convoy, just one single black SUV parked at a precise distance from the aircraft. A man in a sharply tailored black suit emerged. His movements were measured, controlled. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't extend a handshake. He simply opened the back door of the SUV. An invitation without words. Musk paused briefly, observing the man's expressionless demeanor. Then, without breaking stride, he stepped into the vehicle. The door closed with a soft thump, and the car immediately pulled away from the runway. Inside, silence filled the cabin. The driver, equally dressed in black, never turned his head. The man who had opened the door sat perfectly still beside Musk, watching but not speaking. No pleasantries, no explanations, only the quiet hum of the city outside. Musk glanced out the window as Washington, D.C. blurred past. Even in the heart of the capital, where life should be bustling, something felt off. As if the world outside was continuing without him. As if he was being removed from it. The SUV weaved through a series of controlled access roads, avoiding regular traffic before coming to a halt in front of the United States Secret Service headquarters. Musk stepped out of the car. And then the strangest thing yet happened. Entering the Secret Service headquarters, he expected security. Biometric scans, ID checks, metal detectors, a gauntlet of clearance procedures. Instead, nothing. No one stopped him. No one asked for identification. The agents at the entrance barely spared him a glance, then gestured for him to proceed. It was as if they already knew everything about him. And that was when he realized. He wasn't just walking into a building. He was stepping into something that had been prepared for him. Something that had been waiting. The hallway stretched endlessly, bathed in the sterile glow of fluorescent lights. His reflection warped against the polished floors as he moved forward. His footsteps echoed strangely, too loud, as if the space itself was bending. Men in black suits passed by, their gazes locked forward, their expressions unreadable. No one spoke. No one acknowledged him. They weren't ignoring him. They were avoiding him. A single agent led the way. He never turned back, never said a word. Musk inhaled, steadying himself. He had launched rockets. Had faced off against industries worth trillions. Had debated some of the most powerful politicians in the world. But this wasn't just power. This was something else entirely. Finally, they stopped. A large, dark gray metal door loomed ahead, featureless except for a small keycard panel. The agent swiped a card. A sharp click echoed through the air. Then, without a word, he stepped aside. No instructions, no orders, just a door, waiting. Musk hesitated only for a second. Then he stepped forward. The door sealed shut behind him. And that was when he saw it. The moment of realization. In the center of the stark, windowless room sat a single steel table. On it, a thick black folder. Musk's eyes locked onto the bold capitalized letters across the cover. Elon Musk Classified. His heartbeat quickened. He reached for the file. And with that, he crossed a threshold he could never return from. Musk could feel the tension wrapping around the room like an invisible force. This wasn't the kind of tension one felt during a high-stakes negotiation or a critical business deal. This was something deeper, something primal. A quiet but unmistakable sense that he was standing at the edge of something dangerous, something that had already begun to unfold before he even stepped foot into this room. He stared at the thick folder in front of him, its black cover reflecting the sterile fluorescent light overhead. The pages within were like a nightmare written in cold, calculated ink. Every milestone in his life had been documented in painstaking detail. Not just the public achievements that the world knew, the founding of Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, the Boring Company, but decisions that had never been made public, confidential discussions, unfinished projects, ideas that had barely formed in his mind before being discarded, even thoughts he had never spoken aloud. And then, the last page, Musk's breath caught in his throat. Elon Musk will disappear in 48 hours. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The statement was simple, concise, yet it carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. Not might disappear, not in danger of disappearing. It was a certainty. Musk was not a man easily shaken. He had defied impossible odds before, launching billion-dollar spacecraft, surviving industry sabotage, outmaneuvering political forces that would rather see him fail. But this was different. Because this time, everything had already been decided. And that was more terrifying than any direct threat. "We need to talk." The voice cut through the heavy silence like a blade. Musk turned, his sharp gaze locking onto the man who had just stepped forward. He was tall, with a rigid posture, sharp features, and cold, calculating eyes. His presence was neither aggressive nor welcoming. It was controlled, precise, like a man who had walked into this room knowing exactly how this conversation would unfold. "I'm Agent Langley." His voice was deep, deliberate, not rushed, not hesitant. He pulled out a chair, sitting directly across from Musk, his gaze unwavering. "And I'm afraid you're not the first person to receive a folder like this." Musk said nothing. He simply studied Langley, searching for any flicker of emotion, something he could read. But there was nothing, only absolute control. "What do you mean?" Musk finally asked, his voice steady, though a bit rougher than usual. Langley didn't answer immediately. Instead, he clasped his hands together, exhaled through his nose, and spoke slowly. "There's a list. A very long list, and every single person on that list has vanished, exactly at the time their file predicted they would." Musk's brow furrowed slightly. "Who's on it?" Langley's expression didn't change. He reached for another file, slid it across the table toward Musk. Musk opened it, and what he saw made his stomach twist. The names. These weren't ordinary people. They were legends. Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Alan Turing, Robert Oppenheimer, Steve Jobs. Every one of them had reshaped the world with their ideas. And now, every one of them shared a terrifying commonality. They had disappeared. Not just died, not passed away from old age or illness. Vanished. Without a trace, without a body, without an explanation. Musk's grip on the file tightened. His voice was quieter this time. "I don't believe it. Einstein died of old age. Jobs had cancer. Turing committed suicide. Oppenheimer suffered from illness." Langley shook his head. "No, Mr. Musk. That's just what history wants you to believe. The truth is much, much darker." Musk's fingers curled around the edge of the folder. Langley leaned forward, lowering his voice. "These people weren't just geniuses. They weren't just visionaries. They were disruptors. Every single one of them was on the verge of pushing humanity past a boundary we weren't meant to cross." Musk felt a chill creep down his spine. "What kind of boundary?" Langley exhaled, running a hand down his tie before sitting back. "Discoveries that would change everything." He tapped the file on the table, holding Musk's gaze. "And you, Elon Musk, are the next name on that list." The truth sinks in. Musk sat motionless for several seconds. His mind wasn't frozen in fear. It was moving at breakneck speed, calculating, analyzing, searching for a flaw in the logic. If what Langley was saying was true, then some force, some hidden hand, had been orchestrating the course of human progress for decades, for centuries even, stopping it whenever it went too far. It had stopped Einstein. It had stopped Tesla. It had stopped Jobs. And now, it was coming for him. Musk's voice was low, controlled. Why me? Langley tapped the file. You've seen what's in there. He paused. You're not just an entrepreneur. You're not just an engineer. You're reshaping the trajectory of the human race. Space travel, artificial intelligence, brain-machine interfaces, technologies that redefine what it means to be human. He studied Musk for a moment. You're not just ahead of your time. You're rewriting the future. Musk met Langley's gaze, his mind racing. And then, after a long silence, he exhaled slowly. His lips curled in the faintest hint of a smirk. 48 hours, huh? Langley nodded. Musk leaned back slightly, tapping his fingers against the table. Then his smirk grew wider. Well then, I guess I have 48 hours to break this system. Langley studied him for a moment, then, almost imperceptibly, smiled. I hope you do, Mr. Musk. Because if you don't. Langley didn't need to finish the sentence. Both men knew exactly what would happen. Musk glanced at the clock on the wall. The countdown had begun. Musk leaned forward, his eyes locked onto Langley. Every muscle in his body tensed. The words the agent had just spoken struck him like a hammer to the chest. No one has ever escaped. The statement echoed in his mind like a preordained sentence, a fate already sealed. But Musk refused to accept that. That was impossible. That was unacceptable. He was not the kind of man to sit back and let fate dictate his existence. He had built his empire from nothing. He had taken impossible ideas, colonizing Mars, creating reusable rockets, building AI neural interfaces, and turned them into reality. If anyone could change the game, it was him. So, what is this? Musk's voice was lower, quieter, but edged with steel as he gestured toward the file. If this wasn't written by the government, then who did? And why? Langley exhaled deeply, as if he had anticipated the question but had hoped it wouldn't be asked. He stood, walked toward a large filing cabinet in the corner of the room and pulled open a heavy drawer. Inside, Musk could see dozens of black folders, identical to his own. Each one thick, pristine, with no markings of age or wear. Langley flipped through them with practiced ease, then extracted one and laid it on the table. Musk's gaze dropped to the name on the cover. Robert Oppenheimer. A chill ran down his spine. The father of the atomic bomb. Langley opened the folder, turned to the last page, and there it was. A single line of text that made Musk's breath catch in his throat. Robert Oppenheimer will disappear on February 18, 1967. Musk's hands clenched into fists. That was the exact date Oppenheimer had died. Langley closed the file with a soft thud, meeting Musk's gaze. Every single one of these files follows the same pattern, he said. Then, he slid another folder across the table. Alan Turing. Musk barely needed to read it, but he did. And there, on the last page, written in the same unyielding font, was the final entry. Alan Turing will disappear on June 7, 1954. The exact date of his alleged suicide. Musk inhaled slowly, his mind accelerating at breakneck speed, trying to stitch together the implications. Then who sent these? This time, his voice held no trace of disbelief, only determination. Langley stared at him, unblinking. We don't know. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Musk felt his grip tighten around the edges of his own file. His mind reeled, processing the implications. Was it possible that history as they knew it wasn't real? Was it possible that these files didn't just predict the future, but created it? No one has ever escaped, Musk repeated Langley's words, but this time there was no fear in his tone, only defiance. Then what if, he said slowly, the only reason these people disappeared is because they knew they would? Langley's expression shifted ever so slightly. Musk leaned forward, his mind ablaze. What if, he continued, these files don't predict the future? What if they dictate it? Langley hesitated. Then, finally, he nodded, slowly. We've considered that possibility. But, he added, no one has ever been able to prove it. The breakthrough, Musk exhaled, leaning back in his chair. If these files had absolute accuracy, then it meant his fate was already decided. Unless the files weren't recording history, unless they were creating it. And if that was true, then he still had a choice. His hands clenched into fists. The people before him had panicked. They had tried to escape, to fight the inevitable, and in doing so, they had walked right into it. What happens if I do nothing? Langley narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Musk set his jaw. If I don't do anything that aligns with what the file predicts, what happens then? Langley didn't answer immediately. Finally, he admitted, we don't know. Everyone who has ever received one of these files has reacted the same way. They've tried to escape it, and in doing so, they've followed exactly the path that was outlined for them. Musk smirked. Then I'll be the first to break the pattern. The first step to changing the future. Langley studied him for a long moment. Then at last, he gave a small nod. If anyone can do it, he said, it's you, Musk. Musk pushed back from the table, rising to his feet. He picked up his file, flipped to the last page, and stared at the words one final time. Elon Musk will disappear in 48 hours. Then, without hesitation, he tore the page in half. Langley's eyes widened slightly. Musk merely smirked, letting the torn paper flutter onto the table. I don't play by their rules. Langley remained silent for a moment. Then, a rare thing happened. He smiled. Then let's change the future. The countdown begins. On the wall, the digital clock ticked forward. 47 hours, 59 minutes remaining, but for the first time, the future was no longer certain. Musk had just done something that no one else before him had dared to try. And if he was right, he had just broken the system. The struggle begins. Time waits for no one. Musk was not a man who believed in destiny, nor was he someone who sat idly by while fate dictated the course of his life. If there was anyone who could bend the laws of the universe, it was him. The moment his conversation with Langley ended, Musk wasted no time. He needed answers, and he needed them now. He boarded his private jet, but this time, the destination wasn't another government facility or a political summit. This time, he was going home, to Tesla's headquarters in Austin, Texas. To Dojo, one of the world's most powerful supercomputers, a system originally built to train autonomous driving AI, but today it would serve a far greater purpose. Musk wasn't using it to optimize algorithms or process vehicle data. He was using it to decode the greatest mystery of his life. Begin analysis. The command was spoken, and instantly Dojo sprang into action. Thousands of lines of code streamed across the screen as the AI system began parsing the contents of the classified file. Not just the words, not just the written records, but something deeper, something no one else had ever attempted to analyze. Tracing the origins, hours passed. The room was dimly lit, the glow of monitors illuminating Musk's face as he watched the AI dig deeper and deeper. And then, finally, the first results. 1. The ink used in the document does not match any known substance on Earth. 2. The paper does not correspond to any manufacturing process on record. 3. No digital footprint, no metadata, no indication that this document was ever created by human hands. Musk narrowed his eyes. That's impossible. This wasn't just an encrypted file. It wasn't just a classified government record. It was as if the document had simply appeared, like it had always existed. Musk clenched his jaw. Scan the ink's electromagnetic frequency. The AI obeyed, running another sweep of the document. For the first time in Dojo's history, the system failed. The system crashes. The monitors flickered. The data became scrambled. Then, in an instant, everything froze. A single message appeared on the screen. Access error. Document does not exist within time-space. Musk stiffened. He had been prepared for anomalies. But this wasn't just an untraceable file. This was something that did not belong to reality as he understood it. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. Run the scan again. Dojo rebooted. The calculations restarted, and this time the result was even stranger. A sequence of numbers began appearing on the screen. Not binary, not any known encryption. A Fibonacci sequence. 1 1 2 3 5 8 13 21. Musk felt a cold sensation run down his spine. A code hidden in nature. The Fibonacci sequence was more than just a mathematical pattern. It was the blueprint of life itself. It dictated the growth of galaxies, the spirals of seashells, the structure of DNA. It was woven into the very fabric of existence. And now, it was embedded in a document that claimed to predict the future. Why? And more importantly, what was it trying to tell him? Musk's fingers flew across the keyboard as he instructed Dojo to search for correlations between the Fibonacci sequence and any known cosmic phenomena. Minutes passed. Then suddenly, a match appeared. The oldest signal in the frequency match detected, cosmic microwave background radiation. Musk's heartbeat quickened. The cosmic microwave background, CMB. The oldest detectable signal in the universe, the remnants of the Big Bang itself. The very fabric of space-time had encoded these patterns left behind from the birth of existence. And somehow, inexplicably, the classified file was connected to it. Musk ran a hand over his face. His mind was spinning, calculations racing through his head faster than he could articulate them. How? How could a file that allegedly predicted his future contain the same numerical sequence found in the fundamental structure of the universe? Unless it didn't come from the future at all. A discovery and a warning. Musk knew he had to go deeper. He turned back to the screen, issuing a new command. Dojo, cross-analyze the document's frequency with any unidentified radio signals in recorded history. The AI processed trillions of data points in mere minutes. Then, a match. A single, unmistakable match. Frequency match detected. Wow signal, 1977. Musk sat frozen. The wow signal, one of the most mysterious transmissions ever recorded. A brief but extremely powerful burst of radio waves picked up from deep space, one that had no known origin. For decades, scientists debated whether it was an intercepted message from an extraterrestrial intelligence. And now, it was linked to the document that had predicted his disappearance. Musk immediately reached for his phone. He dialed Langley. The agent picked up on the first ring. "Langley, I know where it came from." There was a pause on the other end. Then, Langley's voice, sharp and controlled. "Where?" Musk exhaled, his words deliberate. "This file isn't from our future. It's from an intelligence beyond Earth." Silence. Then, Langley let out a slow breath. "Then we're not just fighting time. We're fighting something that doesn't belong to this world." Musk glanced at the clock. 46 hours remaining. This was no longer just a battle for his survival. This was a battle against a force humanity had never encountered before. The counterattack and the unexpected ending. The control room was bathed in the eerie glow of digital screens, the flickering blue light casting long shadows as data surged through global networks. The quantum transmission system was operating at full capacity. Terabytes of classified information, the hidden truth behind the Watchers, the list of erased geniuses, the signal from Proxima Centauri, were now exposed to the world. For the first time, the Watchers were no longer invisible. Musk stood in the center of the chaos, eyes locked onto the cascading lines of code that spread across the internet like wildfire. Every major network, every encrypted database, every unfiltered corner of the web, nothing could contain it anymore. Langley checked his watch, his expression tense. "The data has been sent, but I have a feeling they won't let this stand." Carter's fingers flew across the keyboard as she monitored the system. "I agree. If the Watchers have the ability to manipulate reality itself, they won't just sit back and watch us do this." And then, the world began to shake. Reality begins to collapse. The very fabric of the room trembled. Walls rippled like water. The ground quivered underfoot, as if reality itself was rejecting what had just happened. The computer screens flickered violently, data becoming corrupted in real time. Lines of code twisted, morphing into unreadable symbols, as if an unseen force was rewriting the very essence of the digital world. Langley instinctively reached for his gun. But deep down, he knew bullets were useless here. Right before their eyes, a distortion in reality began to form, a gaping void, an absence of existence itself. A tear in the universe. A void where space bent, twisted, and collapsed in on itself. And then they arrived. The Watchers reveal themselves. No longer just distant cryptic signals. No longer just unseen forces pulling the strings from the shadows. This time, they stood before Musk and his team. Their forms were unstable. Not flesh and bone, not machine, not anything formed to the physical laws of this universe. They flickered between states of existence, shifting across multiple timelines at once. The air crackled with energy. A low, resonant hum filled the room. Not sound, but something deeper, something that bypassed the ears and resonated inside the skull. Then, a voice, not spoken, not transmitted, but heard directly in their minds. "You have altered the future." Carter froze. "They're speaking to us directly." Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step forward, standing face to face with the beings that had controlled the course of human history for centuries. "So what?" His voice was steady, unwavering. "Are you afraid? Afraid of losing control?" One of the watchers moved closer. The very space around it distorting, warping like an unseen gravitational force bent the air itself. For the first time, the voice echoed, "We do not know what will happen next." The final standoff. Langley's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" The watchers did not respond immediately. Instead, a surge of energy swept through the room. The lights died. The computer screens went black. The information Musk had just broadcast to the world, the truth about the watchers, vanished from every digital system. It was as if it had never existed. Musk's eyes narrowed. Then, something impossible happened. The data, the lines of code that had been erased, began to reappear. Piece by piece, line by line, it was being reconstructed. Humanity had already seen the truth. Musk let out a slow breath. This was exactly what he had planned for. The watchers could manipulate reality. They could erase digital footprints. But they couldn't erase human memory. Millions of people had seen the data before it was wiped. Millions of minds had absorbed the truth. Scientists, researchers, ordinary people. They had witnessed it. And once a mind had seen reality for what it was, it could not be made to unsee it. One of the watchers hovered closer, its presence pressing against Musk like an unseen weight. Its voice came, layered, resonant, emotionless. "You have opened a door that was never meant to be opened." Musk's reply was immediate. "No. I broke the chains you placed on humanity." The irreversible shift, the watchers did not respond immediately. They flickered, shifting erratically, as if debating among themselves in a frequency beyond human perception. Langley clenched his fists. "So what happens now?" A silence fell. Then the watcher's voice resonated again. "Your future is no longer ours to control." Musk narrowed his eyes. "What does that mean?" For the first time, they hesitated. And then the answer came. "You have passed the test. From this moment forward, the timeline no longer belongs to us. It belongs to you." And then, with a final distortion of space, they vanished. No sound, no remnants, no trace, as if they had never been there. The price of freedom. The silence that followed was almost suffocating. No more tremors, no more flickering lights. Everything had returned to normal, but nothing would ever be the same again. Musk scanned the room, his pulse slowing. Langley was still staring at where the watchers had just been. "So, we won?" Carter glanced at the screens. The data was still there. Somehow it had not been erased. "No," she said. "We didn't win. They just don't control us anymore." Musk exhaled deeply, stepping forward, looking out through the glass panels of the control room into the vast, open night sky. Humanity was free. For the first time in history, there were no hidden forces pulling the strings, no unseen hands guiding civilization's progress. From here on out, humanity would rise or fall on its own. But freedom was not the same as safety. Without the watchers overseeing the limits of progress, there was nothing stopping humanity from going too far. Would they use this newfound control to thrive? Or would they destroy themselves? No one knew. The future was no longer preordained. For the first time, it was completely unknown. Musk closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the weight of it all settle. Then he opened them, a small smirk forming on his lips. He didn't know what would come next. But he did know one thing. This was only the beginning. The world had returned to normal. But what was normal anymore? Inside the control center at SpaceX, the monitors still glowed, the systems still ran as they always had. But an invisible shift had taken place, a change that could not be undone. The watchers had disappeared. Or rather, they had retreated. Musk stood in silence, gazing out the window at the vast, unbroken night sky. Billions of stars shimmered above, unchanged, unbothered, just as they had been for millions of years. But now, Musk knew the truth. They were watching. The question was no longer whether they would return, The real question was, had they ever truly left, or were they simply waiting to see what humanity would do when left to forge its own path? Langley stepped up beside him, his expression still carrying traces of uncertainty. So, have we really escaped them? Musk let out a quiet breath, a small, knowing smile touching his lips. Escaped? He shook his head. No, Langley, we were never truly imprisoned. Langley frowned slightly, absorbing the words. We just didn't realize it, Musk added. A pause. Then, Langley nodded slowly. All right, he said, crossing his arms. So what now? Musk didn't answer immediately. He inhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a brief moment, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. Then he exhaled, his voice calm, steady. There are no more boundaries. Langley's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Musk turned from the window, his eyes sharper than ever. The Watchers once decided who was allowed to push humanity forward. They chose which minds would be erased, which discoveries would never be realized. His gaze burned with conviction. But now, that control is gone. He let the silence stretch, watching as Langley's expression shifted, the realization dawning on him. Langley spoke the words before Musk could. So now, anyone can change the world. A cold breeze drifted through the glass panels, but inside the room, the air felt lighter than ever before. A sense of absolute, unshackled freedom. But freedom comes with responsibility. The unanswered questions. Across the room, Carter was still seated at her console, entering the final data logs into the system. She had witnessed it all. From the moment the files were uncovered, to the revelation of the Watchers, to the ultimate confrontation that had shattered the hidden control over humanity. And yet, there was still so much she didn't understand. She stared at the screen, fingers hesitating over the keyboard. Then, almost as if speaking to herself, she whispered, "What were they?" The words hung in the air. No one answered, because no one knew. Were the Watchers an alien species, observing from beyond the stars, a consciousness beyond time, drifting through the dimensions, or something far older, an ancient intelligence that had always been here since the dawn of civilization? No one had an answer, but one thing was certain: they were not gods. They had tried to control humanity, had shaped the course of history to fit their design, and yet it was humanity that had broken free. Musk wasn't afraid of them coming back. But what did unsettle him was something far worse. What if humanity became the new Watchers? Because history had shown time and time again, there were always those who sought to control the future. The future unfolds. The door had been flung wide open. No more Watchers, no more hidden hands steering the course of human advancement. But that also meant no one was left to stop them from going too far. Without restrictions, without artificial barriers, would humanity rise beyond the stars? Or would they spiral into chaos and destruction? One day, the human race would push beyond its limits once again. Would they become the next Watchers? Would they shape the universe to their will, bending time, controlling the fate of others, dictating which civilizations would advance and which would be erased? Or would they break the cycle entirely, choosing a path that had never been walked before? No one knew. No one could know. But there was one thing Musk understood more than anyone. The future doesn't belong to those who watch. It belongs to those who act. Musk's war had ended, but humanity's battle had just begun. Now the choice was no longer in the hands of unseen beings. It was in ours. What do you think? Do you believe we are truly free, or are we just pieces on a larger chessboard, playing a game we have yet to understand? And if one day, humanity becomes powerful enough to decide the fate of others, will we be any different from the Watchers, or will we choose a different path? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more mysteries, untold truths, and mind-bending revelations. I'll see you in the next story.